Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 137 of The Best Games Period. I'm your host, Jack Gardner, and with me this week is the wonderful first and possibly last guest of The Best Games Period, Kazuma Hashimoto.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on, Jack.
Yeah, always. I love having you. Vivacious and stoic in equal measures.
Oh, that sounds sexy. Like very serious and sexy.
You know, when I think cowboys, I think stoic, so obviously I
Oh, okay.
associated it with you.
Okay, that makes sense. All right.
Yeah,
Excellent. Yeah,
yeah.
it's always nice being here. Thank you for having me on again.
Well, and we've been talking about wanting to do an episode on Final Fantasy XIV for a very long time. I totally forgot if I introduced that was the game we're going to be talking about on this episode. But it is. So we've been talking about it for a while, and we're both pretty excited to dig into this. I should probably take off my glasses so that my computer screen is not reflected visually into the stream.
As long as you're not looking at anything like weird, I think it's fine.
I mean, I'm looking at my face talking, so...
That's not weird. You're beautiful.
I don't know about that. I take good selfies, but that's all angles. That's all angles. So, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm also doing great. So, video
Silence because we
games.
both know that's a lie.
Video games.
Yeah, so do we just want to jump into Final Fantasy XIV? I know this is this the first MMO you played?
It's not the first MMO that I've played. Oh my gosh, I'm just messing with my camera. I should have done this before the show started, but here we are. It's not the first MMO I played. The first MMO I played was Ion.
Oh, I love Ion. Oh, wow, that's so many. That's a long time ago for me and some really good memories. I really loved Ion.
I bought it because there was flying in it and it looked cool. And then I never got to max level.
You know what we're doing now?
No, I don't know.
Yeah, we're gonna play Ion.
I don't even know if I still have it. I don't know.
No, it's free to play now.
Is it really?
Yeah, it's free to play. It's been
Oh
free
my
to play for a
gosh.
couple of years.
Oh my gosh. So yeah, I that was my first MMO. I played it for a while. It did not interest me. Mostly because I was really looking more for a story-focused sort of experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I quickly figured out that that's not what MMOs are all about. So I really just kind of avoided MMOs for a very long time after that. I played Guild Wars 2.
That's a game.
I like that I don't have to pay a subscription for it, so I can just kind of like pop in occasionally, see what's going on.
Did you play it at launch? Because you had to pay originally.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, you had to buy the game. It was basically a pay to play.
I mean, I did buy the game. I just mean there isn't like a subscription.
Oh no, yeah, no, it's just play to play. But pay to play, but now it's free.
Okay.
Yeah, Guild Wars is now free.
So yeah, I played like a big lion creature on that one. That was fun.
Yeah, the char are really cool.
Yeah. And then I played some EVE Online for a little bit. That's really not my jam. I really like reading about things that happen in EVE. I don't actually like playing EVE all that much. And then I got Final Fantasy XIV after a Realm Reborn came out, because I had been reading about like the cool like end of world event that they did, and really wanted to get in on what this whole thing was all about. And I played it for, I think I got up to like level 40. And then I stopped because I got really, really angry at at a part of the main quest line in the original like vanilla Final Fantasy XIV, where for like 5 hours you're sent running around the continent to get like these different ingredients, and like you're being told that they're there to like bring together the legendary heroes so you can go fight this god creature. I'm like, okay, cool. I'm doing something. Then it just turns out you're getting ingredients for a big party, and I was so angry. I was
they're
angry.
patching that out. They're patching that out soon.
That was infuriating to me, and I just stopped playing for like 5 years, and then I started playing again recently. And now I'm halfway through Stormblood, and also have a healer that's almost at max level because I've just been dinking around doing things. So that's my experience with MMOs in a nutshell. Do you want to like kind of give your history? I don't know.
Sure.
I did
it's
like
gonna
a
be a
weird
long one.
turntable motion. I don't know why I did that.
It's okay. It's gonna be a long history. So I started playing MMOs when I was, I think, 11 or 12 years old. I was playing on private Ragnarok Online servers because you used to have to pay $15 a month to play Ragnarok Online. So I'd hang out on private servers with some friends I had at the time, and then I went to my first gaming convention with my dad, and I went to check out a game called Lineage 2. It's a really, really insanely popular Korean MMO. It's still very popular in Korea and Japan.
Mm-hmm.
And they gave me the game for free because I was just sitting there playing like the entire time. And then I played that game for 8.5 years. Like, dedicated. Like,
Okay.
like, straight up dedicated. Like,
Yep.
I would run 300 versus 300 PvP battles with people. I would skip school to do raids. I was in the same guild as my dad, so he was like, you gotta stay home, like, we need another healer. And I'm like, okay, cool. So I gotta skip school. He'd like say I was sick and shit, you know? But from
Rad
there
dad.
I played, kind of. You know, yeah. From then I played Ion. I played Ion at launch. I played for about 6 months to 7 months before I hit max level, and then the end game was just PvP. It really wasn't for me. I played Blade and Soul on the Chinese servers with my boyfriend Jake for 5 years before it was localized. And I've just been playing a lot of MMOs. I really enjoy MMOs. I play a lot of Korean MMOs like Lost Ark, or Chinese MMOs like Wuxia, Moonlight Blade. And I had actually played Final Fantasy XIV in 1.0, so I had an account from 1.0, but only because the game was dirt cheap when they were selling it, because it was hitting like its end of service type thing for 1.0.
Yeah.
And then
can you tell us a little bit about... I guess we can get into this after you finish, but I'm curious to know more about kind of that
it was absolutely broken. All I can say is that it was absolutely broken. Like
the final days.
Oh, the final days were incredible. I don't think there's anything in an MMO that could measure to those final days. I think 14 kind of lives off of the glory days of those final days, in my opinion. But yeah, and then I played 14. Like I played it for like two or 3 weeks before the game shut down, and then when it came back up, I'm sharing some of my internet history here. I used to be an influencer on Tumblr.
Ooh.
Square Enix sent me 5 copies of Final Fantasy XIV and was like, hey, do you want to play this with your friends? And I tried to get friends to play it with me, and no one played it with me. So it was just me, and I was just gifting like codes to people, hoping that they would play, but they just didn't care about the game at all. Flash forward to when Heavensward came out. Jake was like, oh cool, I'll play their dragon people. So he subbed, got the game, and I resubbed, and we started playing, and now we've been playing on and off, doing Savage, extremes, and whatnot, up to now, basically.
Okay. So, why was Final Fantasy XIV such a failure?
1.0 as a failure? Yeah, it was just the gameplay. The gameplay was really terrible. The gameplay was just awful. Like, nothing makes sense. The leveling was, like, impossible. Like, it's so hard to describe, but, like, you could level gathering craft and like crafting professions faster than you could like your melee and magic professions, like your jobs. And like it was clear that the team that had been on it before didn't know what they were doing. Narratively, I think 1.0 is like better than most of what's been going on now. for reasons we're going to be getting into later probably. And the build up to the end of days was really interesting and really cool because again, like you would have instances in which they would spawn like chimeras in town that would just kill all the players, but this was because like Dalamud was like getting closer to like Earth and everything, like the meteor was. You would have oh, I can't remember the name of this monster, but it would literally spawn in at Aetherites and destroy Aetherites and shit. You would have to go to sleep to basically leave the game, right? When you would log back in, you would have a dream that you would get dreams of like Nail von Darnus like killing your friends and shit.
Okay.
Like there was just so much put into those final days that it was really just an experience. And I remember being there at the end, waiting for the timer to tick and then seeing that final cutscene. And I was like, wow, this is like really cool. Like this is a really, I guess, like formative moment for like MMOs, or I guess this MMO in particular. And then when it came back, it's 14. It is what it is now, and it's been changed and rebalanced so much as well from 2.0 that I'd say the game in the way it's structured is barely recognizable in some ways. Like, if you play Final Fantasy XIV now, even from 2.0 like onward, it's very different from when you first started playing 2.0 when the game relaunched. I remember having to grind fates to get chocobo certificates and fates to get the alliance tickets or whatever they're called, to get the chocobo certificate to get my chocobo, and having to run like leaves and whatnot to level up, grinding in northern Thanalan around like Camp Blue Fog for like hours on end because Palace of the Dead didn't exist to hit 50, grinding your artifact gear, doing the coils of Bahamut, like, and just the way things are structured now and how quickly you level up is very, very different from when the game first began. And they're even patching out the quest line that you talked about, Jack, with the feast.
Yeah.
They're patching that out because so many people hate that fucking quest line.
Good.
They're
glad.
getting rid of it. Yeah, they're just getting rid of it.
But also, everyone should have to suffer as I have suffered.
You know what? That's what level jumps are for, right?
Okay, so like the state of the game was not good. So
No.
kind of can you kind of like walk us through like how they went about trying to resurrect this game? Because that's kind of a huge story in and of itself.
Some people have done several video documentaries about it. I really haven't looked into this too much, if I'm honest. I just know that they completely restructured the team and put Yoshi P, Naoki Yoshida on it. And basically, like, he revamped everything and changed the whole direction and, like, production schedule of the game, and it became the game it is now. So it's basically the whole team working together to kind of, like, reform and reshape this game and make it manageable and more appealing. And he took a lot of inspiration, I think, from like World of Warcraft and Guild Wars specifically. That's like mentioned. So if you look at gameplay from like these three games, you'll notice some similarities between the three, basically.
Okay.
Yeah, if people want to know more about it, you should definitely look up some like YouTube documentaries about it. I'm again not super learned about the development side of this, mostly because I feel like a lot of the videos that do talk about this focus specifically on Yoshi P and don't really talk about anyone else's involvement and kind of do that gaming auteur thing to him where he's like, oh, he's the savior of the game, savior of the company, and like savior of the community kind of thing. So yeah, if you're watching that, take that with a grain of salt. Understand that there are other people behind the game that also contributed to its success.
Yeah, especially in MMO. Yeah. Okay, so essentially, can you give us a rundown of the story pre-Reborn?
Yeah, so basically you were an adventurer and you were fighting the Garlean Empire and you dealt with Nail von Darnus, which is the White Raven. You only see Nail again in the Coils of Bahamut, and that's where they wrap up the 1.0 storyline. For anyone that hasn't done that, you should probably go and do that, because some of the best content in this game is all optional. Like, some of the best writing is literally all in the optional content. And dealt with the coming of, like, Meteor, and it also dealt with, like, basically, the Eorzeans and the Beast Tribes, primarily, along with the Garlean, like, invasion and their unification, I'm using air quotes, of Eorzea and whatnot.
Hmm.
And back then, the primals could actually speak in 1.0, so they would tell you, like, you know, their plights and shit, or like how you are destroying the land and their people and whatnot. Now it's not so much. It
Now they're
seems like
just big scary monsters.
exactly they have no autonomy, they have no thoughts. You know, beast tribes are just savages. Um, that's, you know, a quote from the game, probably. Uh, but
Yeah.
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 But yeah, like it's changed direction a lot. Going from this point where you would communicate with basically like these deities that the beast tribes would summon out of desperation, because you and the Garleans are kind of like destroying the planet. And now it's more like, oh, the Garleans are here, that kind of thing. Because like there were even unique storylines, like really unique storylines for each starting area. Like in Gridania, if you started there, like you were an outsider, so you'd have like the wood sin basically, right? Because Gridania was very xenophobic and very like not about outsiders. And a lot of these tensions between like the different cities and stuff and how they view like certain races within the world is again more elaborated on in 1.0
Okay.
than it is now. So yeah, if you also want to go back and see like other cutscenes and shit with 1.0 and experience the story, people have uploaded like complete like footage of 1.0 and whatnot as well.
Okay.
Yeah, it's something you really got to experience yourself, like just sort of like soak in and like absorb and like read the text. The cutscenes were also, in my opinion, they had better mocapping, but yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Um. So then they basically blew up Meteor, and that's where we start A Realm Reborn, right?
Uh, well, so what happened was Nail von Darnus was basically tethered to Bahamut inside of Dalamud, which was the meteor, the Allagan moon, where they had sealed Bahamut, and Bahamut was a primal, so like a summon. You try to stop Nail from summoning Dalamud, it's too late. Dalamud bursts open, Bahamut comes out, and just lays waste to everything. Louis Swa, the leader of the Scions of the Seventh Dawn, sacrifices himself and becomes Phoenix, to seal Bahamut, basically. You only find out about him becoming Phoenix in the Coils of Bahamut story. He literally, like, one punches Bahamut and then dissipates into anime fairy dust. It's a really, really ridiculous cutscene. Um, yeah, and then that's where 2.0 begins, with you having the hear, think, feel cutscene and reacquainting yourselves with the Scions, even though you technically already know them from 1.0, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah. So then you basically, are you supposed to be, are any of the characters supposed to be the same characters from before that cataclysm?
Yes.
Okay. So essentially, if you're starting a new character, you're just like, hey, I'm waking up. I don't
hmm
know who I am or whatever. Or maybe you do. Did levels carry over? I don't know. Like what?
God, I can't remember.
Yeah.
I really can't remember. This was like so long ago. This was like 5 years ago or something. Oh God, it's been so long. I'm old.
Lost to the mists of time 5 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, so the basic plot of vanilla Final Fantasy XIV follows you as like this warrior of light, um, essentially fighting the Garlean Empire, and you find out towards the end of that there is, um, there's like this weird shadowy organization that's trying to destroy the world, and they hijack this weapon that the Garleans were going to use called Ultima Weapon, and you defeat
Oh, the
it.
Ascians. Oh, the Ascians are actually in 1.0 as well. Well, a
Oh,
really cool thing about the
okay.
Ascians in 1.0 was that there was one, and he was the only NPC without a shadow.
Ooh.
So people were like, oh, is this like a glitch? But no, it was because he's an Ascian. He doesn't have a shadow. So that was like, people were like, oh my God, that's so cool. Like, it's like the small environmental details, you know?
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, the Ascians are like the shadowy organization trying to destroy the world,
Mhm.
um, and that's basically it. Like a lot of vanilla 14 Realm Reborn is just exploring the world, getting acquainted with everything, setting up all the pieces, and then not doing a whole lot with them. I think that's fair to say, right?
Yeah, it's sort of set it up, and now they're continuing it in Shadowbringers because Heaven's Ward and Stormblood are more about like other conflicts in the world. Um, like with Heaven's Ward being mostly about like the theocracy of Ishgard and history revisionism. And Stormblood, Stormblood being Stormblood, you know.
Which we will get into.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like the basic plot of Heaven's Ward revolves around, like you said, history revisionism, and it's all about how the city state of Ishgard has contextualized and recontextualized the events of the Dragon Song War, which is this giant war that they have been waging in the north against the dragons, the Draconids,
The
Draconians.
yeah, the Draconians, the Scalekin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that touches on a lot of things that have to do with the rest of Eorzea as well, and then Stormblood just takes you on like a complete right angle turn to a different part of the world that is only lightly connected to the rest of the game, as far as I can tell so far.
Okay. So again, this is so much lore that is not given to you in 2.0 at all, but okay, so the reason that Gridania, for example, is so xenophobic is because the Alamegans were actually trying to conquer Eorzea as well. They were a huge, like, city-state, like, a really impressive military country, basically. Ruled over by, like, I think an emperor or something, not an emperor, like a king, I think. And they had tried to invade Eorzea several times. Now, when their king went crazy and started killing everybody in the city, no one came to help them. Because the Garleans had seen that, you know, this whole civil war was going on in Alamega, then they decided to occupy it, with Gaius von Belsar leading the charge, the Black Wolf of Garlemald. And they asked for help from Eorzea, and Eorzea said no, because you tried to invade us once, so fuck you. So that's how Alamego got occupied by Gaius von Belsar. After von Belsar's defeat, Xenos was made viceroy, as he was also viceroy of Doma. And this all sounds very interesting, but again, you don't learn about any of this shit in the actual game. This is all things you have to learn outside of it, because this was all information given to you in like 1.0. It's never like touched upon again.
Okay. Interesting. All right. So that's new information
things.
For me.
Yeah.
So yeah, the Stormblood is weird for a lot of reasons. And then Shadowbringers I haven't played yet, so maybe you can talk about that one a little bit.
So Shadowbringers continues a plot thread from the Crystal Tower optional raids and the 3.4 expansion, in which you're introduced to the Warriors of Darkness. So that's Ardbert and like his group that look
my boy.
like. I love Ardbert. That's my husband.
And he's the character you see in all of like the cutscenes for the game.
No,
right?
no,
it looks like him.
It is him, but that's also not him. They're basically saying that in every universe there are 14 different stars, and in each star you look the same. You look like him.
Okay.
He's the main character boy. So my boyfriend was lucky. He made his character look like that because he was like, I want to see myself in the cutscene. So when he's playing through Shadowbringers, he's like, haha, it's me! Like, all the time. Like, all the fucking time.
You know, it would have been really cool if they could have programmed something to just, like, copy your character model for Ardbert.
They do that for the Dark Knight storyline.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Play Dark Knight. Dark Knight's good. Dark Knight's a good storyline. It's good until it isn't. And then it's good
it's
again.
it's good until all of Eorzea starts turning it into a meme
Yeah.
about how they live in a society.
Oh God, come on! Ah! Okay, anyways, Shadowbringers has you going to the first. You're teleported there by the Crystal Exarch, who's actually a character from the Crystal Tower scenario that is optional to do. You should totally do it before you play Shadowbringers, or you will not know what is going on.
Just as a general rule, do the extra content in this game, or you won't have any idea of what's going on. And also, you'll miss Alexander, which is easily the best part of the Heavensward game.
Well, absolutely, yeah. And the Sophia, the Warring Triad raids are really good in my opinion. Like, mechanically, not so much narratively, but that's, again, if you're like, what the fuck happened to Regula von Hydrus? Well, go play the Warring Triad storyline because, not all fascists. I guess he's a good guy now. Anyways, that's this game, really. Anyways.
Let's not make that into a hashtag.
Ah! It probably already is one. Yeah, so you go to the first and... Oh, God, okay. I really don't like Shadowbringers.
Yeah.
You go to the first and meet with the Crystal Exarch who summons you there.
The first...
They just call it the first. It's like the world, like
Okay.
the first star, basically. And they end up reusing like some assets that were made for like 1.0 and stuff. So you're like, oh my God, it's the 1.0 world, Like, it's nostalgia, I guess. Anyways, and that world is being overtaken with light because too much good in the world means that you're gonna not have enough shadow or bad things, so you're gonna completely absorb the world in light.
So is shadow inherently evil?
Shadows of the Ascian, so yes.
Okay, because like that's something that has really confused me about in general, like the moral alignments of like.
You know what? I'm gonna tell you about the moral alignments in this game. I'm gonna tell you that they mean nothing.
Well, because it's very confusing because they've set up like the light to be like good, like that's just like morally good and pure, but Shadowbringers kind of like undoes that, and so now I'm just kind of I'm confused.
Let me find something to read to you really quickly, right? And I think
Okay.
this will kind of summarize Shadowbringers as a whole. Because it really does. And this is a statement from Yoshi P regarding someone asking him if he wanted to say anything else about an interview he had with Kotaku regarding LGBT plus representation, which we will also get to some point during this because it'll have to do with Stormblood. And he said, with matters regarding LGBTQ plus expression in Final Fantasy XIV, we can't necessarily say that people who oppose it are universally evil, and that people who for it are universally good. It is understandable if you were raised with certain preconceived notions about gender or sexuality, then you would not think to challenge them. What we are trying to impart to our players is a sense of freedom. The freedom to choose how they want to express themselves as individuals, and the freedom to retain their own values. We don't want to place blame on either side. If we do become one-sided in a way we approach things, much like the seemingly good force of light overtaking the first, we run the risk of being too extreme and alienating the people who stand on the other side of the issue. And that's Shadowbringers.
That's stupid as hell.
That's the official statement. I can't make that shit up.
I'm mad that you put that in my brain.
It's all the things you need to consider when playing this game and ingesting its politics and its narrative, right?
Just like... Yeah, you wouldn't want to alienate the bigots on the other side of the issue.
Emmett Selk was right.
Gosh. Dang.
Sorry, I made myself cough. I hate that so much. Yeah, so you end up dealing with Emmett Selk, and he is introduced to you in Stormblood, actually, and he basically does this really dumb reveal that kind of removes, I guess, a lot of what made the Garleans, like, I guess, compelling villains or more realistic, that they were just, like, an oppressive military nation that were obviously extremely imperialist and fascist. I'd say they're even, like, a good draw of comparison to the Japanese Empire. But, well, again, we'll get to that with Stormblood discussion. And you end up finding out that, oh no, the Garleans, they're just the way they are because the guy who founded the Empire was really an Ascian, so he put them on this path to begin with. You know, like
Right.
it, yeah, so it's just like one of those things. And you have to deal with him walking around with you talking about how much he loved colonizing countries and peoples on various different stars and sowing seeds of discussion. He's basically the founding father of fascism and the concept of it in Final Fantasy XIV. And at the
Cool,
end of the
cool,
expansion,
super cool.
yeah, and at the end of the expansion, he's like, well, it's not my fault. Feel bad for me. And it's some of the most ridiculous writing I've encountered in this game. Regarding this whole thing, regarding all the external politics surrounding the game and developer statements and stuff, but he ends up being the main villain and you end up stopping him because what he wants to do is basically genocide half the human race. You know, he wants to Thanos. He's like anime Thanos.
Okay,
Because
cool.
he thinks it will bring back his dead friends, right? And of course, like you think that your party would be like, "Oh, that's up." But at one point, one of your party members says, "Well, I'd do the same thing if I was in his position."
Is it what's his face?
It's Alice.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's not Thancred. I wish,
No,
but
no,
yeah.
not Thancred.
Oh, Oriange.
No, I was thinking I was thinking about Alice's brother.
Oh, Alphino?
Yeah.
No. They also try in Shadowbringers to make you sympathize with people that actively participate in slavery.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, there's
Cool,
like
cool, 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 cool.
so Yulmore is basically a city where if you want to live there, you have to exist as a slave. But don't worry about it, it's okay because the people you're serving gave up everything to basically become privileged leaders and slave owners. So, you
They're
know, they don't
super
own it.
nice.
Yeah, so they're super nice and they don't own anything and they love you and take care of you. Like there's nothing wrong with the system, I guess.
Hmm.
Um, you know,
Hmm.
just the moral quandaries of Final Fantasy XIV. 'Cause like they even make it a point while you're going through the story to be like, oh, well, to be like, you know, to live in high society here, we have to give up everything that we own. And then so basically our slaves take care of us. So, you know, it's kind of like equivalent exchange or whatever. And they wouldn't be here if they didn't like this. We treat them
Hmm.
well.
Then why are they slaves?
Don't worry, it's okay. Everything's fine. You don't have to think about it because it doesn't matter, right?
Uh, I'm
Yeah.
yeah. I don't know. I thought that quote would have been from Alphino because he's like the king of bad ideas in Final Fantasy XIV.
Mhm.
Um,
He's very centrist. He's like the king of centricism in Final Fantasy XIV.
but also he's just bad at doing things. Um, well, like he's good. I guess he's good at like doing bad things. Um, like so I guess maybe we'll backpedal a little bit to talk. We'll discuss Vanilla and then Heaven's Ward, Stormblood, and Shadowbringers in more detail.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Nice. Yeah.
Structure. Um. So yeah, in Vanilla 14, Alphino kind of decides to just form an independent, basically a giant private military force
Hmm.
that's exclusively under his control, and he tries to frame it as being like the good thing to do. Um,
Can we just start calling him like Big Boss now?
I'd rather we didn't. Um, but then he's
He's
just
gonna have an eye patch in a later game. Don't worry about it.
that would be an improvement for him. That would be one fashion choice I would approve of for Alphino. Um, and he doesn't realize that if, for example, someone who isn't him is in charge, that's a lot of power that could be abused until that happens, and like there's a giant military coup that I guess didn't amount to anything because everything about it was fake except for
Yeah, it was
like
all fake.
except for one of the main characters like losing an arm,
Which doesn't matter in the end anyways.
because yeah, I guess he's still like a badass fighter even with one arm, which is that's fine. It's a cool moment. It's just
I mean, the character that they kill doesn't really stay dead either, except for the other one that they kill.
Yeah, it was disappointing for me. Just it's disappointing for me in retrospect because I found that moment to be the first time I actually started caring about what was going on in Final Fantasy XIV, because I thought it showed that there was
There were
this
stakes to what we were doing.
yeah, there were stakes, there were consequences, there was this possibility to shake up the status quo, right? And bear in mind, this moment comes like 100 hours into Final Fantasy XIV. It takes a while to get there. If you're doing it your first time, maybe. I don't know. Some people can get through this game really fast. Kazuma.
Don't talk to me about that. Okay, I want to preface this before everyone thinks that I hate this game and I'm just dragging it for the sake of dragging it. I have 3 level 80 characters, okay? Like, I was severely
Different characters.
Different characters. And I have 80. Like, I have 5 level 80 jobs on my main, not including gatherers and crafters, okay? Like, there was a time when I played this game, like I woke up and I did nothing but play this game. I was breathing, living, being in the moment with this game.
Yeah.
Insert a Gone Girl monologue here, right? Tease out something in me that I didn't know existed, you know, that whole thing. And I really, really liked this game. I enjoy this game. I can't even explain how much time I sunk into this, like, and how much I just liked existing in this game until Stormblood came out. And then I realized, you know what, maybe this game isn't what I thought it was, that kind of thing. So I'm not just criticizing this game because I hate it or I give the impression that I hate it. I really, really loved this game. And the memories I made with this game, the time I spent with friends in this game, my boyfriend and I spent so much time in that game together, just role-playing and hanging out and being around each other. And it's a very important part of, like, my relationship with some people and how I met some really amazing people who are still in my life. But yeah, there's some things in this game that narratively fall completely flat.
Yeah, but we have talked about this before, so I know that you consider, like, Heaven's Ward, like, the high point of the series?
Yes, that is the most inoffensive expansion this game has ever released.
So what makes Heaven's Ward so interesting to you?
It's not even that it's interesting, it's just that in hindsight, it's better than everything that's come after.
Okay.
It's really strange. But this mostly has to do, again, with the external politics of this game and how everything is framed. And most Western people who enjoyed Stormblood and played Stormblood probably won't feel the same way I do, and that's fine, that's fair, and that's absolutely valid. But I come from a place where I am reminded every day about the war crimes and atrocities Japan has committed against other countries, and that's some shit that Stormblood delves into and handles in ways that are absolutely inexcusable. And for that reason, I can't say Stormblood is better than Heaven's Ward by any means, or Shadowbringers and how it decides to deal with fascism and take this very centrist stance on, well, it can't be good or bad. If we do too many good things or get rid of bigots, then, you know, like, then what's left? That kind of whole attitude.
Then the world is too good.
Yeah, then what are we gonna do? Oh my god. But Heaven's Ward, in hindsight, its approach to, I guess, taking down the theocracy that was ruling Ishgard and how it handled history revisionism was probably done in, I guess, the best way it could have been done for the team, given what they've made since. Though I don't necessarily like that Americ is in a position of power now, because he's just the Pope's bastard son. That feels like a misplacement of power. I don't like how they regard biracial characters in Final Fantasy XIV as a whole, like Hilda the half-breed. Really?
Yeah, that's not great.
And just the way the game tries to tackle, like, real-world issues, but do it in ways that are, I guess, subpar at best.
Well,
but Heaven's Ward does it better than the rest.
Well, I mean, like you were saying, Shadowbringers has kind of, like, revealed that the central ethos of this game is
there are no politics.
Well, the central ethos is, like, you know, you can't be too extreme one way or the other, like, and that, like, that's kind of the whole, I guess, how it justifies a lot of the bad stuff that's in there.
Hmm.
Like, I don't know. It doesn't want to really delve too deeply into anything or take any hard stances on anything.
Except for how it feels about the Korean community. That's really
Mm.
about the only hard stance this game has taken regarding any external politics.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Um, yeah, you've told me a bit about that, but I am definitely. Do we just want to get to Stormblood? Because like that's where a lot of problems start.
I mean, if you feel like there's anything we should mention about Heavensward, I think we should definitely do that.
Um, I mean, I liked Heaven's Ward. I think it has like the best optional content in the game between Alexander and like the Sky Pirate missions
Oh,
and like
Alexander was awesome.
the I forget what it's called, like the giant floating island bit.
Oh, Void Ark?
Yeah.
Mach? Yeah.
No, not Void Ark. The optional stuff that's on like the giant floating island.
Oh, the Diadem.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, wow. You played the Diadem?
I
You were playing. Oh, wow.
I haven't done the diadem yet, but
Oh, okay, because I was
I
like, I did Diadem and whew.
I I know what it's about roughly. Um or the not the diadem, the containment bay
Oh
stuff.
yeah, yeah, the Azisla, yeah, the Warring Triads. Yeah.
Yes, yes. Okay. So like all of that stuff's really good. Like Alexander is by far right now some of the best stuff that I have experienced in Final Fantasy XIV, and it's an entirely self-contained like side story about time traveling kobolds.
Yes, and Al Ra.
Yeah, it's great. I love it. It was really interesting, and I actually cared about the characters, and I wanted everything else to be like that too. And I've just nothing else has even come close. Really.
Yeah, I think again, I think what Final Fantasy XIV does really well is when it takes things like Alexander and kind of reinterprets it and reimagines it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have like that really great homage to like Final Fantasy IX's Alexander, the final Alexander fight, and how that's handled. I think is just amazing. Like how they handle it mechanically. I think mechanically this game is really incredible with how it executes its ideas in regards to raids and dungeons and whatnot. And yeah, like the optional shit's the best. Like we should really do Bahamut sometime. Bahamut's really good. I think
Yeah,
you'd
let's
like
do it.
Bahamut. Yeah, we're gonna do Bahamut together. Um, but yeah,
Um,
it's just yeah, Heaven's Ward's optional stuff was just so memorable and so fun.
well, and it was just interesting seeing like finally seeing for the first time in the series up to that point like the first time you interact with like essentially what's a beast tribe like that's essentially the draconids that I don't know why I keep calling them that the Dracovians. Oh my gosh. uh
You mean the oh
the
my God.
the dragon people.
Yeah, yeah.
um the insert group name of the dragon people. Like that's the first time you really interact with anyone with one of these like non-humanoid
Hmm.
um
Oh,
factions.
the Dravanians.
Dravanians, thank you.
Yeah.
That's the first time you really interact with any of these non-human factions or non-humanoid factions, and the game asks you to consider things from their perspective, um, in a meaningful way that is actually incorporated into the plot. Because one of the things that bugged me in vanilla Final Fantasy and has bugged me through the rest of the series because they never really address anything to do with this in meaningful ways is how they deal with the quote unquote beast tribes. And they treat them, like you said, as savages, and like
Hmm.
with all of the connotations that come with the word savages. And it's frankly kind of gross and weird, and I don't care for it. But Heaven's Ward is the first and so far only expansion that actually like really delves into that in a way that felt satisfying and like justified, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about that.
No, I completely agree with that because the way they portray the Dravanians in this, I feel, is again how they've tried to, I guess, portray the beast tribes in the past, but they've done it on a level which humanizes them more because they're more a central part of the story instead of like a set piece to get from point A to point B to point C and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And like I don't think Nidhogg feels like a villain. I feel like this is someone who lived here, was betrayed and wronged, and basically had their entire people like genocided and massacred because of some like more dominant like Western like white centric force. Again, there are a lot of real world parallels to things in this game that you could draw comparisons to, but we'll talk about why none of that matters when we hit Stormblood. So yeah, I feel like I don't know. In hindsight, Heaven's Ward was probably the best expansion so far narratively and how it handled a lot of its issues and a lot of its politics. When I played it, I wasn't very impressed with it. The narratives in this Final Fantasy game don't really impress me at all, honestly. I think they're okay at best. I basically get through the story to get to the end game content to play with friends. But in retrospect, Heaven's Ward is probably the best. Or in my opinion, the best or more tasteful.
And that brings us to Stormblood, your favorite.
Oh yeah. Do you want to start on Stormblood? How did you feel about Stormblood? Where you are now with it?
I don't particularly care for it. Like it's fine. It's fine. I feel like it's a misguided attempt to like try to do something new when the entire game series up to this point has been set in Eorzea and dealing with like the political machinations of Eorzea. And I understand like the desire to get out of that and do something new, but I would have much preferred doing something more interesting and like shaking up that shook up the status quo of Eorzea, because like that's all we've really been experiencing and care about up until that point. And frankly, like going to a different area where you have no knowledge of what's going on and constantly have to have people explaining things to you, I don't care for it. And I don't care for the attitude that a lot of the characters have of like, we don't understand what's going on, but we're gonna fix these problems. You know, we're gonna fix your society.
It's very white saviory if you take into consideration that how they feel the main characters should look is essentially like Artbert, like the guy in all the cinematics, then yeah, like it's a very white savior narrative. You can say that, well, my character is from Alamigo and they were displaced in the invasion, blah, blah, blah. But ultimately, like, that's not what your character is doing and representing. You are an outsider. You are a Western force going eastward to liberate people who apparently need your help, or to force people who have no business in any of these wars to fight for you and on your side.
Yeah, that's the other thing that really bothers me, because the entire reason that you go to the Far East is to essentially open up a second front in the war against Garlemald.
Mm-hmm.
By convincing a bunch of people who have been subjugated all of their lives to rise up in rebellion one more time. And this time it's totally going to work out.
And to reinstate the imperial leader of Doma.
Yeah.
Yeah. I sure love the quests that make you go to the Azim Steppe to beat the characters that are clearly coded as being Chinese Mongols to fight in your war for you.
Yeah, it's I don't know. Like, especially I don't know how to like relate this without sounding really pretentious or whatever, but like I'm from America. I live here. I'm aware of what America's done in Latin America over the years by getting guerrilla fighters and like backing, you know, these violent coups. And there's just, especially with current events being what they are, that's something that is pertinent right now, and it's really uncomfortable to me to be essentially doing that in a video game. And in like the entire incident starts off with a terrorist attack. Like that's how Stormblood essentially kicks itself off. And instead of like, you know, being diplomatic and figuring things out, our protagonist heroes are just like, well, time to go arm resistance fighters to fight our war for us.
Yep.
And I'm just like, let's, how about we don't? How about we just send a diplomatic envoy and like explain what happened? How about that? How about that? And then we can go back to fighting gods, because that's way better. And it seems like maybe more important. I don't know. I am not super into Stormblood as it is right now. It's a nice change of scenery, but the justification for that change of scenery is not good.
It's very flimsy, and I feel like it doesn't... I just don't think this expansion's good. I don't think it's very tasteful. But this is, again, if it stayed in Alamigo and focused on Alamigo, that would be different. But when it brought Doma into the equation and everything that kind of represents outside of the game, that's when the problem kind of began. So for people that are not aware of, I guess, Japanese-Korean relations, they're not good, and they haven't been good since the end of World War II. And you're wondering, why, Kazuma, why do you keep bringing this up? Why do you keep bringing up the Koreans? Why do you keep talking about Japanese imperialism? Well, this is a Japanese-made game, and obviously there are some influences in this game that draw heavy inspiration from World War II, and thusly the Korean occupation of Japan. The Japanese occupation of Korea. Got that all mixed up.
Okay.
So a lot of the beats that Stormblood carries are extremely reminiscent of what Imperial Japan did to South Korea, especially with the Doman Enclave story, where a member of the Doman Enclave says, oh, we weren't allowed to practice our language or our culture in public, so we had to do it secretly. And this is what Koreans had to do during the Japanese occupation, because during the Japanese occupation, you were not allowed to speak Korean, have any kind of Korean attire or culture or anything in your house, and you were not allowed to have a Korean name. They would rename you a Japanese name.
Okay.
Yeah, they were basically trying to completely expunge all Korean culture from everything. And they draw parallels to this in the Doman Enclave storyline and in the main Stormblood storyline dealing with Doma. Now, when Stormblood came out, there was a huge boycott of this game among the Korean community, because they were like, this is not good, this is unfair, especially because currently Japan has not paid reparations to Korea or properly apologized. So you can see how that's kind of like a, maybe don't do that kind of thing in your video game type deal. And this went a step further with the inclusion of a wartime occupation era outfit as a cosmetic you can buy in game, which resulted in more protests and more boycotting of the game.
Would it
yeah.
Like, I guess, because some people in like Western circles might have a hard time like relating that. I guess I'm asking, like, would it be a good parallel to be like, yeah, if China released a big video game that was super popular and then released an expansion for it in the United States, and there was just like
imagine a Western developer releases a game where you can have a Nazi, Hitler Youth uniform as a cosmetic.
Yeah,
that would be the equivalent.
And it's portrayed as like, this is super stylish and fashionable.
It's harmless. Yeah, it represents an era in Doman society where we had Western influence, whatever. Like, that's basically how they phrased it, because they say it's part of the Taisho Roman era.
Okay.
And this was during the Japanese occupation of South Korea. These were outfits that Korean people had to wear people are still alive that lived through this occupation. And that's again the issue with this expansion and what it tries to draw from, or I guess what it references
Right.
regarding Stormblood. Because if it
Right.
had just stayed in All Amigo, and I don't know, I guess we, a white man, were trying to liberate a bunch of brown people, there's still a very bad taste in my mouth with that. Considering that Lise is supposed to be all Amigan, but she's like lily white and blonde and blue-eyed. That's again something that I think people should definitely discuss regarding colorism in Japanese video games. But that's another social issue we can save for another time.
Yeah,
this is
there's a
this
lot.
is a whole, yeah. There's a big bucket.
And I know that there are some people who out there who would be like, well, it's just a game, you're reading too much into it. Except you made a really good point to me the other day, and that was that, like, all of the food, like, the food in this game is explicitly Japanese, right?
Yes. Even the attire, except for stuff that's Vietnamese, which is found on Alamigan NPCs. So Alamigo is supposed to be Southeast Asia. So you get Southeast Asian food, some of it like Indian food, Central like Asia, but all of the Doman stuff is all Japanese. There was even a question brought up to Yoshi P at the Chinese Fan Fest. Why are there no Chinese food items in the game? And he was like, oh, it was an oversight. We're gonna add them. Like, okay.
Okay. So Stormblood.
Yeah. I think if the situation was different between, again, like Korea and Japan, and political relations were different, I could imagine the story not having been as bad as it was, I guess. I don't know. I'm not Korean, so I can't really say that, like that's not my place. But as it stands, I feel like Stormblood is a story that's too heavily impacted by World War II that it's impossible to divorce from this, and therefore I think its story just isn't very good in what it represents.
Yeah, and that has been something that has also carried over into Shadowbringers, right?
Yeah. Again, with this whole like centrist sort of thing, with Emmett Selk being again like the father of fascism, essentially, or imperialism in Final Fantasy XIV. And I interviewed Yoshi P, and the person that I was interviewing him with, because it was a shared interview, they asked specifically if Emmett Selk is supposed to be a sympathetic character, and they said yes, he is. You are supposed to sympathize with the man who basically enjoys and loves conquering other nations and forcing them to submit to imperial rule, because that's the kind of game and the kind of message they want, because they feel like that makes a villain more complex.
Well, yeah, and I guess there has been this trend of wanting people to sympathize with villains. And I understand that. It's just that needs to come with the framing that what they're doing is unambiguously wrong, which I think is not what's happening in Shadowbringers.
No, at least in my opinion, it's not. Like, again, when you have one of the major characters being like, well, I would do what he was doing in that situation. Right. Yeah, like, you can't have the characters be like, oh, well, actually, like, the NPC characters need to serve as some sort of moral compass for you, or sort of guide how you feel about this, at least in that respect, I would hope. Because if you find yourself like, oh, Emmett Selk was right, there should be at least some sort of tether in the game that's like, no, this is bad, and it isn't until like the very, very end when suddenly everyone's like, no, like we deserve to live too, and you're like, oh, maybe there's a hope. But when you defeat Emmett Selk, he's like, remember that we lived, remember that I lived once too, and then fades into nothing like a anime villain. Like, it's so, again, because I come from a different perspective than a lot of Western gamers regarding this, especially with You see me tweet a lot about this, Jack. A lot of the state Japan is in regarding politics, the rise of like nationalists, how an extreme right-wing party has been in power for 80 years, basically unchallenged, that sympathizing with fascists is the last thing that needs to happen in Japanese media right now.
Yeah, and well, and that's another thing to keep in mind for a lot of Western audiences is that this is a game developed by a Japanese studio. Um, so it has inherently baked into it a lot of ideas that are pertinent to Japan specifically.
Hmm.
Um, and so that's another thing that just kind of bolsters what you've been saying about, how there are all these parallels to Japan and South Korea and Vietnam and all of these real world parallels that exist. And also there are those real world political parallels that exist. Um, and I read your interview. Um, I, I guess I find it very irresponsible, the response that Yoshi P gave to you about what informs the politics of Final Fantasy XIV.
Oh, was it the now I'm 46 years old, but I'm a gamer? Was it that response? Hang on.
No, 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 no. It's
Oh, I like Tactics Ogre.
I like Tactics Ogre.
It wasn't Yoshi P that gave that response. So
Okay.
it was Banri Oda, but he's the one who was responsible for all of the main storyline stuff, basically. Like
Yeah,
he's the yeah, and all the lore. And so
responsible for writing the game.
yeah.
Okay.
So basically, I'll just let everyone know, like what I said. I basically asked them, I said, Final Fantasy XIV seems to draw inspiration to real-world parallels to politics and history, with Ishgard primarily being a theocracy and the possibility of Amarat being read as a criticism of the Japanese bureaucratic system's inability to respond to natural disasters. Was this intentional, and if so, what message would you like to leave the players with regarding the politics of this game? And what Oda responded to was, Final Fantasy XIV's approach to reflecting real-world issues is influenced by Tactics Ogre. There is an element of massacre there, and I didn't play this game. And if I didn't play this game, the approach of Final Fantasy XIV's story would have been different. Tactics Ogre has a story that includes ethnic cleansing and greatly influenced my desire to reflect real life conflicts and issues to make Final Fantasy XIV more realistic. But he had also prefaced that with basically like hang on, I have to sneeze. Oh, I'm so sorry, I have to sneeze.
It's all good.
That there isn't a link to oh god, I'm so sorry. Oh
It's
god.
okay. It's okay.
Sorry, I have cats and I'm allergic to them. But his answer before that was, rather than taking inspiration from current affairs and government systems, I am a big fan of history, so I do take some inspiration from history books. But he ends it with, but there isn't a link to real-life politics. But he likes Tactics Ogre, which was directly influenced by the Bosnian genocide.
It's not about anything. It's just about Tactics Ogre.
Yeah, I just like Tactics Ogre. That's just such a baffling thing to say to me, that this is not political, but also I like Tactics Ogre.
It's an RPG we expect people to sink hundreds of hours into, but it's not about anything. It's just about Tactics Ogre.
Yeah, that's just wild to me, I guess. I don't know.
Pretty upsetting.
Yeah, because for me at least, like, when I went into this game, I was like, oh, these are intentional parallels, like, this is on purpose. They have something they want to say, and they're going to say it, and regardless of what they say, at least it means something. But it's mostly, I really liked Matsuno's work, and Matsuno is the guy that wrote Final Fantasy XII, Tactics Ogre, Tactics, like all these really formative political works in JRPGs that kind of reshaped how people wrote JRPGs.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, no, I just like his work, but it's not political, when all of his work is inspired in some way by some political event in history. Like, I don't know.
It's just about Tactics Ogre. And Tactics Ogre, as we all know, wasn't about anything.
Yeah, I just like Tactics Ogre.
Uh, so, 10 out of 10 game.
I'm still like I'm
Best
still in the
game,
process of reviewing
period.
it. Yeah, I mean I'm still in the process of reviewing it because I'm not done yet because I don't want to give it a score without having completed the 5.0 story because who knows? I could eat my own ass with this one, right? Like they could shock me, they could be like really amazing and be very like anti-fascist, anti-imperialist, like oh it could be so goddamn good. Um I
Probably
personally
not,
don't,
though.
yeah, I personally don't think it's going to be that way, and that's, I guess, me being cynical, and I think that's fair given their track record with releasing an occupation era outfit in the game, um, making comments about the Korean community that absolutely do not have to be made, such as blaming the Korean community for the lack of LGBT plus inclusion in the game over a pride parade the Korean community wasn't even aware that was going on in a
Oh,
completely different country.
and didn't you say that they were shutting down like forum discussions from like Koreans about this topic?
Yeah, so Korean people were actually posting on the Final Fantasy XIV forums regarding my interview when I asked Yoshi P the issue with the Taisho Roman attire, the occupation era outfit, and he said, "Well, the Koreans asked for it instead of the Chinese people, the players." Well, the official publishers of Final Fantasy XIV in Korea said they did not ask for it. They had no idea this outfit was coming out. So the Korean players were asking on the forum, "Hey, like, is this real or did you lie during this interview?" And the posts were just getting closed and shut down.
Yeah. Well, it also, I don't know. It feels like you might have made some goofs if your publisher for your game in a territory has to come out and say no, no, nope, you didn't do that.
Mm-mm.
That's not what happened.
Yeah,
It's
there's
kind of a
just so
mess.
yeah, there's just so much externally that bogs down this game that I'm actually like outside of reviewing it, when I'm done with the game, I'm not gonna play it again because I don't feel comfortable giving them my money.
Yeah.
Like, and that's that.
Okay. So I was gonna ask, like, you had mentioned, like, depending on how that interview went, um, you may or may not continue playing. So that's kind of you've fallen on the side of you're not gonna be play it anymore.
So basically, I wanted to see how the Korean community would react because as a
Mm-hmm.
Japanese person, it's not my place to decide if, like, oh, this is an acceptable apology, because like I'm not Korean. Again, that's like the main thing. And it's important that as a Japanese person, I stand in solidarity with Korean people because of, again, the Japanese government not properly apologizing to the Korean people for anything that they've done. The occupation, the comfort women issue, and again, Japanese politics, vilifying Korean people just in general, in everyday life. Like, I have mutuals I'm with that are Korean living in Japan, and every day they hear Japanese people just say horrible things about Koreans. Like, there is so much xenophobia and racism in that country regarding this issue. And as a Japanese person, it's again my responsibility to stand in solidarity with them. And so I'm going to do that, even over a video game, because it means something.
Yeah.
It's the right thing to do. So that's my stance I'm taking on it. I don't expect other people to follow suit. They don't have to. They can do whatever they want, but that's where I stand on this issue, like morally, if you know what I mean. It's like
For sure.
how I wouldn't buy a Dragon Quest game because the guy who composes the music is known for being a huge nationalist and an
Oh,
imperialist.
cool.
Yeah. It's like one of
Cool.
those things, like
Yeah.
yeah, people are gonna buy the game. Maybe my one purchase doesn't matter, but it's again, it's
It's a
the
personal
yeah,
decision.
it's morals. My morals don't align with it. And
Yeah.
maybe that makes me sound arrogant, but it's what I choose to do and how I choose to be.
For
Um,
sure.
yeah. So I'm not going to be playing 14 unless if an actual apology is reached. Maybe at Korean Fan Fest it might happen. Who knows? I doubt it. Everyone I know that plays this game on the Korean servers has canceled their Fan Fest tickets and
Whew.
hotels.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay. So we're kind of getting to the end here. I
Are
guess
we? We could talk another 5 hours about
we
this one,
we
maybe.
really we really could, but also
Yeah,
I have things I need to do today.
yeah.
Um,
This is a part one of part two. Just kidding. Uh,
we've done that before. Maybe we'll
oh,
revisit this game again
yeah.
in the future. But so we decided we were going to talk about this. Usually the guest nominates the game that we're going to talk about as one of the best games, period. Doesn't seem like that's what you're going to do with this one.
I'm gonna be honest, and I'm gonna say some things that people are gonna get angry about. I think this is a pretty mediocre Final Fantasy title narratively, considering its political backings. I guess I mean what it stands for, or it stands for nothing, honestly. Um, and I think that there are other Final Fantasy games people could play that have similar themes, but could get a better experience from. As an MMO, I think it's great. I think it's really fun. And it's one of the most enjoyable experiences I've ever had. But considering this is a game that relies so heavily on its narrative, like, no. I can't. I can't say this is like the best game ever.
Yeah, that's totally fair. Yeah, I definitely like I'm not an MMO person. As far as MMOs go, I consider this one of the better MMOs. Maybe even one of the best MMOs. It's just I still don't care for MMOs.
Mm-hmm.
The,
Play with me. We're gonna change that. Don't worry
okay,
about that.
okay.
Yeah.
So it's hard for me to say whether or not it's good. All I know is that I've managed to make it almost to the level cap in Final Fantasy XIV, which for me is a big deal. But that being said, I also don't consider the story very interesting. Some of the characters have interesting components to them that I enjoy or love to hate, but it's it's based so much on how much effort and care that you put into the game. The game really, if you're gonna enjoy it as a game, requires you to put in a lot of yourself above and beyond the mechanics and even above and beyond what it is explicitly asking from you
Mm-hmm.
in terms of time investment. Like I feel like the only real way to super enjoy this game is if you have friends or if you have this deep love of role playing where you're gonna come up with your history for your character and all of that. But in order to do like the role playing aspect, you need to have a ton of time already sunk in to know about the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I personally tend not to favor games that require that in order for you to have a good time require you to have other people playing with you, because often that just means you're enjoying the company of your friends and that gets mistaken for like the game being good.
Mm-hmm.
um
Like I
it
could have the same social experience in Monster Hunter. I'll put it that way.
Right.
Yeah.
Or I call it like the Mario Party effect, because frankly I don't think Mario Party is a great series, but you you can still have a good time because it's a party game, and most of the enjoyment is going to be coming from the party element of the game, not necessarily from the game itself.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard for me to gauge MMOs. I don't think it's one of the best games, period. It just has way too many problems going on underneath the hood. Way too many. And basically all of those problems come down to not wanting to take a stance on anything and actually commit to saying anything, because it's trying to be all things to everybody and doesn't even want to alienate bigots.
Mm-hmm.
So why would I ever endorse something that is just milk toast to the extreme? There are better things I could have played in the hundreds of hours I've put into this game. things that could have tackled the same subject matter in more interesting detail, or heck, I could have played other, like you were saying, other Final Fantasy games.
Yeah.
In the time I have put into this game, I could have played every Final Fantasy game. So maybe just do that instead. That's a better use of your time.
Go play Tactics Ogre.
Go play Tactics Ogre. It's a game that's actually about something, and isn't afraid to be about something.
Basically, if you want to see the framework that they draw a lot of inspirations from, go play Tactics Ogre and go play Final Fantasy Tactics.
Maybe Vagrant Story too.
Vagrant Story is really good. And maybe Final Fantasy XII if you're feeling fancy. It's my favorite Final Fantasy game. We should talk about Final Fantasy XII on this podcast.
We should. We talked about it, I think, way back in episode 11, and I feel like I was unkind to it.
Yeah, well, you're about to be kind to it now, baby.
I just really don't like Vaughn. Vaughn is the worst.
Don't worry, we'll fix that. Maybe.
Maybe, baby. With all of that being said, Kazuma, thank you so much for being on the show. Is there anything you want to plug? Any of your work that you've come out that's been really proud? Your stream, where can people find you? All that.
You can find me at JusticeKazi_ on Twitter and at JusticeKazi on Twitch. I actually want to plug RPG Site because we've been doing some really good coverage on RPGs recently. We're basically just focused on RPGs. That's where you can find my interview with Yoshi P and Banri Oda. And you can read some of the comments there. And yeah, that's where you can find me. In terms of plugging, I'd actually like to plug The Last Adventure Cast on Twitter. They're a great podcast run by 3 women of color. If you're interested in hearing some of their perspectives on this, they do talk about Final Fantasy XIV on one of their podcasts. And they talk about media in general. And I'd also like to plug Jack.
What?
Yes! You can find Riverboat Jack at Riverboat Jack on Twitter. Yeah, you deserve it. You're good. Thank you again for being here and having this podcast as an open forum to discuss these kinds of things in games, because usually this shit gets brushed over completely. And thank you for again allowing me to share my perspective as a Japanese person about a Japanese video game.
Well, you're very welcome. I'm just trying to get over the fact that this is the first time anyone's plugged me on my own show. But I appreciate it. And I'm glad that I can be that platform for people who need to get that, who want to get that voice out, that extra bit of criticism that usually gets brushed aside. So on that note, this is the Best Games Period, and you can find us on Twitter at Best Games Period. We're on SoundCloud, Spotify, YouTube. We're streaming on YouTube right now. We also have a Patreon. If you enjoy the stuff that we put out every week, head on over to patreon.com/bestgamesperiod and toss us $1, because honestly, it really helps us keep going. It helps motivate us and let us know that, we're doing a good job, I guess. And yeah, you can also find this podcast over on community.extra-life.org. And if you don't know what Extra Life is, it's a fantastic charity that helps sick and injured kids all across the United States and Canada. And when you sign up, you can actually choose which Children's Miracle Network hospital you want to support, and 100% of everything you raise goes directly to that hospital to help sick and injured kids. It's a really great charity, so please check it out. You can learn more over on extra-life.org. And yeah, I think that's about it. So thank you all for your time and for listening. And again, thank you to Kazuma for coming on the show. It's always a pleasure.
It's always nice being here. If you keep complimenting me and thanking me, I'll have to keep thanking you. We're going to hit into this weird Ouroboros of thanking each other.
We'll see you next time on the Flippity Dippity.